So we have Sudhir from JP Morgan. We have Patrick from Flower. One of the new people joining us on the panel here is Heng. He is also at Flower. He leads a lot of the framework, architecture, and software work. It's an integral part of the team. We have Erran Li, who is at AWS. He's head of science for the Human in the Loop team. He's had a number of positions in the Bay Area for a number of years now, such as Uber and Pony.ai and a number of other companies as well. And then we have Kevin. Kevin is from Coinbase. He is one of the co-creators of the X402 standard. He's one of the leadership team for the developer platform work that they're doing there. And so across this set of people here, we have a lot of expertise on different aspects of the decentralized and federated ecosystem. And so I want to sort of launch in and ask a question. Feel free to just jump in at any time. And the open question I want to ask you all is, what have we not talked about yet that is a key aspect of this whole sort of mission that we're on? We talked about many things, but I wonder if any of you want to raise a topic or two that we just haven't looked at yet.
I can go first. And this is something that I was alluding to in my earlier talk is one of the key things that I'm looking to the distinguished, attendees here to solve is the rewarding mechanism, and not just the reward mechanism, because I think from a technology perspective that can be addressed. What I'm also looking for is, how do you solve that in a very fair and transparent manner,
right,
without putting a trust on a single entity? That is something that I think we haven't talked about it. So I would like to hear from other panelists, and also a bit of a challenge for, as I said, all the smart people in the room.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on that. So I've worked in the kind of distributed systems space for a while, and worked at a company called Storage, which built an incentive mechanism for distributed and decentralized object storage. So solving similar problems. And there's a lot of work to be done around like local device accounting and how can we prove verifiably that this compute was used to leverage the trading model, and then attribute that back to the user. At Coinbase, we're actually looking to solve that problem directly with the X402 protocol, which was mentioned earlier. And what we built is an incentive mechanism over HTTP rails. So it uses the 402 status code, which was built into the internet back in the late 80s. Hasn't really been lit up yet. It's the 402 payment required. You might be familiar with 404, which is file not found. And what we're looking to do is enable those kinds of incentives with stable coins tied directly to the device. And I know the Vana team spoke a little bit about this before, but we're really excited around enabling teams to build these types of applications. Even today in the App Store, I think the number 3 app is an app that pays you for all the transcriptions of your phone calls. And so I think we'll increasingly see more of a need for tokens outside of the pool of publicly available data. We'll see a need for accessing all the latent compute capacity that exists across devices in the world. So that might be your Tesla, or it might be your iPhone that with the new iPhone 17 Pro has a 6-core GPU. And so finding ways that we can tap into this latent, underutilized capacity that exists, incentivize users to share that capacity, we can actually bring down commoditized cloud costs, create better solutions for users. So.
Yeah. I just want to add that, for the federated data marketplace, apart from just from the economic or financial perspective, I think it's also have another implementation, which means we already managed to standardize all the data suppliers, which is actually a more challenging job, especially from the framework side. We also wanted to do something like a model.fit, and magically everything happens under the hood. You don't have to worry about how data is collected. You don't worry about how the model is transmitted to your client and things like that. But in reality, if you want to set up a federated learning system, you still have to go through a ton of manual process, like especially like data in hospitals and also financial companies. it's just a ton of red tapes and to just get access to some small amount of data. So I think if we can have a data marketplace, that also means that we already managed to some extent have a standard format for all the data suppliers and also to unify them. And from that point on, Flower can even support model of fits, just like how you do machine learning these days, and everything happens magically on the code.
Yeah, I think that data set marketplaces, this has been a goal of the industry for a long time. And back at Intel, we had been trying to figure out this for 10 years, and it goes through different iterations over time. But I think we're finally at the point where it's great to see that companies like JP Morgan are really investing in this and understand that if you can incentivize the data providers in some way to come to the table, then that's really when decentralized AI takes off. So we absolutely see a need for that kind of thing. And I don't know exactly what the answer is to actually making that a reality, but I think the smart contract work that's certainly been started is absolutely a step in the right direction. As far as things that we haven't really discussed, we've talked a lot about data privacy today and why that's necessary for federated learning. It's really one of the core tenets of it. But model IP, and actually when you want to have competitors that can work together for mutual benefit, how do you actually ensure that a model can be sent to a data provider who you don't necessarily know ahead of time, and then verify that they're not going to be able to steal that model and then use it for their own purposes? So that's another aspect that I think is important to really consider if we want to scale this to a very large set of enterprise users.
Luckily, some hardware support for some of these concerns is coming, but no, in general, it's still a fairly difficult problem without that hardware as well. Erran, I was wondering, you might have seen a lot of discussions about using the edge for like decades now. Mm-hmm. And with people have written papers about leveraging mobile devices. Right. Do you think we're ever closer to using edge, mobile, these sort of resources on the edge of the network to do some of this AI work?
Yeah, I think it's sort of time's right, because as intelligence sort of getting closer to the edge, right? So they encounter a lot of these sort of governance, privacy issues, right? So I think, I think I used to work at Alexa. We actually do federated learning because it's getting increasingly hard to directly train this customer data, right? So their data lives on the device, so we just do federated learning, right? So you do computation on the gradients locally, and they just exchange gradients instead of getting the actual raw data back to the cloud, right? So I think that's, I would say, I think it's happening, but I would also want to, you mentioned like what's we haven't talked about. I think, really sort of, if you think about it, learning from data, that's sort of, the old paradigm, right? The new paradigm is learning from experience, learning from environments. I haven't seen a lot of work sort of from federated data to federated environment, right? Like, environment is all these days that if you train your agents, you're sort of improve your agent skills, right? Can we actually do federated environments, right? So that we can support, agents that can learn from, decentralized environments. Yeah.
Interesting, because I guess inherently doing RL, you could aggregate the models if you have independence, or you could at least run a lot of those things independently for quite a long time. Whereas training typically has a lot of communication required for every single step. That's interesting.
Can I pick up on something that you just mentioned? And to your point, Nick, what hasn't been talked about is I think what you just alluded to is the governance, the model governance. Most of the frameworks that I have looked at, it's all like, how do you solve the federated AI part? But there is less discussion and advancement in the direction of the governance. Because if you look at any of the single, especially I can speak about the financial institutions, there is a very stringent policies with respect to model risk and governance, and how do you promote the model from one to another environment. Maybe there exists, and maybe I just need more exposure and learning. I just haven't seen it yet, and I haven't seen folks talking about it as well.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to hear someone in this industry talking about governance, because back when I was working on OpenFL at Intel, we were really trying to push on the governance aspect of this is really important if you want to have competitors or any kind of regulated industry that's working together. Mm-hmm. I think there's always this trade-off, because you want things to be as easy to use as possible, but then you also need to have these necessary steps that are in place so that you can have agreements at every stage of the pipeline. So I think that's really a great area for all of these federated learning frameworks, and for Flower in particular to be investing in.
To what degree do folks here think that the governance, to what degree are the problems societal or adoption agreement of what mechanisms they need, and then to what degree are the technical components allowed to enable those things? What I mean by that is, I think there's not a clear understanding between companies about what happens when they collectively train a model. Who owns that model? How do you monetize it? And so if they don't know exactly what they want the technology to do yet, it can be hard to build for that need. Do you think we can, do you have any thoughts on this? It's like social versus technical.
I have a very simple answer actually to that.
Yes.
Again, I can only speak on behalf of myself and, on my personal views, is if we are in the financial industry, our first and foremost objective is to generate profit for us, for our investors, and for our clients. So to your point, is it to what degree? The answer is absolute highest priority, right? Because if anything that we do is not necessarily resulting in any of the three, then it's a good project. It's definitely an interesting initiative. End of the day, we need to solve the business problems, and this also incentivize the folks that are investing in us. So I think that, to me, my personal view is that this is one of the top priorities.
Yeah, and just to add on that, this has been a problem in open source since day one, right? And I think what I've learned working in the open source space is that good governance starts on day zero. And so before you set out to define a project, have a clear approach to governance early on and keep that. And I think that's where you see success around even some of the crypto projects like Ethereum and Bitcoin. These are open protocols that have governance standards, and in just the same way as operating systems like Linux and blockchains like Ethereum have had to build these governance standards in. I think learning from the industry is really important. And so I would definitely recommend taking that approach and thinking about governance at day zero and defining that in relation to the project's objectives.
So one resource that I noticed we didn't talk about much today, we talked about compute and data, but if you build decentralized systems, you get a lot closer to people. And so I was curious if any of you had thoughts on what that might unlock. If it's in the extreme form, it could be a mobile, and you can have that human available in that system. But even inside organizations doing federated learning or doing decentralized learning, there's a much greater opportunity to have people perhaps label data and these sort of things. So any views on data and compute are huge drivers for this, but is the user also a huge driver?
Definitely. The user is the one that's generating the data that's powering this. And there have been great open source projects like Open Assistant, which was a project that emerged on Hugging Face, where they created a website, and users, without an economic incentive, were just labeling data to try and fine tune a model to compete with GPT-3 in an open source way. And this was one of the earlier attempts at kind of open source language models. I think with the right incentives, as we mentioned earlier, these things can get a flywheel that can supercharge this. And so finding ways to tap into kind of, again, we talk about latent compute capital, but the latent human capital, how can we tap into that, incentivize it, and get people doing jobs around data labeling to drive RLHF data sets to improve the user experience for models. I think it's a greenfield of opportunity.
Yeah, arguably it could be just as important as having all these RL environments. If you can, one of the best RL environments would be if you had a person being able to assist its search for new information.
That's right.
Erran, you're in the HIL team.
Yeah.
And so what do you think, human in the loop, how would some of the things you're seeing in that setting maybe transfer over?
Yeah. So I think, in the old days, right? So, I mean, the annotators just do very sort of simple task, right? Where any human can do. So these days, I think, we don't call them annotator anymore. They're really professional experts, right? They do, for example, right? They're sort of coming up with solutions to LMO, right? They're solving very hard problems, right? Like not just in STEMs, but in sort of a lot of these professional domain. For example, legal. A lot of these sort of domains, right? So you want to really learn the skills, right? Like these long horizon tasks, right? So I think, you either learn from the offline data, right? Or people already sort of collected them is from humans, right? Or you learn online, right? But if you learn online, then you don't know, whether you did it correctly, right? So you would need, human feedback, right? To actually give you a signal, right? Whether, is self-play, self-evolving is really sort of very popular these days, right? But there's certain capabilities that it can do it really well, but just the model looking at its own trajectories and say, oh, I succeeded, right? But there are hard tasks where it would need human feedback, right? So how that tied to decentralization, I think that's actually decentralization as an edge. If you think about these frontier labs, they're desperate for a lot of these data, right? I mean, not data anymore. It's like experiences, trajectories, right? So they basically buy a lot of these from a lot of these companies, right? If you think of decentralization, people have shared like goals, right? So then, it's much easier to, like, let's say, we have, let's say 10 million people that contribute to this decentralized environmental experiences, right? So it's much easier to collect from in a decentralized way than in a centralized way, right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
I want to give maybe a concrete example here of how I think it applies to having a human in the loop. And in working in the medical imaging domain applied to federated learning for so long, there were some really interesting use cases that came up with. You might have a company that spends millions of dollars going through FDA approval, trying to get these models actually into the field. And they go through that entire process. It gets deployed to the hospitals. But then what you'll find is that sometimes the model doesn't perform very well on a specific subset of people or different distribution of the data that exists due to model drift or any other number of variables. And so I think there's certainly an opportunity to do some fine-tuning for individual hospitals or individual nodes within that federation. And the question is, how can we, there's a couple questions to come up, one of which is, how can those minor modifications that improve outcomes be more easily vetted by these regulatory agencies? But then the other is, how do you decide what the threshold is to what you withhold locally for each of these individual hospitals too. So I think there's great opportunity for these iterative processes that gradually refine these models over time, and then different ways that we can experiment with how to withhold that information and actually make measurable improvements to how these get used for novel use cases.
Right. Well, I just want to mention, we can open it up to the floor. If people have questions they want to sort of have examined, we can have that discussion. Oh, immediately there's two. So let's go to the audience. There's a lady just in the back there. She had her hand up first. The microphone's coming right to you. Then I see you right there. We'll come to you next.
Hey, so I have more of a business question than a tech question. So I come from a computer science, AI research background, but I'm a product manager now. And I deal with a lot of B2B clients and stakeholders. So my question is that, what all problems do you face when you want to convince a non-technical stakeholder to adopt a decentralized AI solution, or any AI solution for that matter? Because I feel like there are so many factors. There's AI ethics, governance, which we want to implement. And then there's something that our engineers want to do. And then there's stakeholders who want to do something else entirely. How do you align everyone together? And what are some challenges that you faced? And what are some solutions that you came up with? I'm interested to know.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that first. So I think this is an eval problem fundamentally. And so in order to solve the business problem, you need to ask the right questions and understand, what is that stakeholder optimizing for? What metrics are they specifically looking to improve through the deployment of the AI? Understanding their needs will let you set up a concrete eval for the language model that you can use to benchmark success, proving the business value for the use case.
I can answer. I have actually a very simple answer for you. Just do not talk about technology. And I actually mean it, right? The moment you start talking about technology, you're putting cart before the horse, or whatever the saying is, right? So the right way to have, and this is exactly what we did with this initiative that I was alluding to earlier, is to your point, exactly right. Just focus on what are you trying to solve and why are you trying to do it. Forget about technology for a moment, whether it's federated AI, whether it's decentralized AI, whether it's LLM, SLM, any kind of buzzword. And that's what, I do it on a daily basis, by the way, right? Is speak the right language to the right audience and you will get it right. That would be, but the problem that you are highlighting is absolutely the critical one, right? We generally tend to start putting the technology before the business, and that leads into in this circular loop of going back and forth.
I want to get the question, the gentleman here, just one row ahead. He was, he was second, and then we'll go back. I'm sorry.
Hi, Michael here. So incentive and governance mechanism have been one of our main concern when deploying federated learning, because we're targeting semi-adversarial environment. And so one thing that I would like to have your opinion on is how important is secure aggregation and differential privacy when you're deploying federated learning in those kind of environments. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it depends on the users. I think it's one of the most exciting fields for privacy preservation. And so finding ways that we can leverage trusted execution environments to preserve users' privacy through their data, I think that unlocks a level of reassurance for the user. And I think it's important to respect the user's privacy as much as possible. I think those that implement architectures that do that will see a lot of success, especially in the marketplace.
Yeah, and I also want to add that, especially related to secure aggregation, which is one of my major. So actually, most of the use cases, they are actually coming from finance, insurance, and those hospital areas. And although many of the people working there, they might know nothing about secure aggregation or differential privacy, but as long as it sounds safe, they definitely want to try it out. So from my perspective, secure aggregation and the different privacy, from the first place, it does provide better security guarantees, especially secure aggregation, which is quite popular among those banks and also insurance companies, because secure aggregation doesn't impact model performance, which obviously their models, their so-called models might just be a logistic regression, which is very sensitive to noises. So those models are also very, so for those specific use cases, things like secure aggregation, it brings in extra costs, communication costs, but it doesn't affect model performance. That's also a good thing to go for those companies. But generally, most of the hospitals and insurance companies, they do value their data privacy, and they basically will ask you to use whatever there is to add everything together. And I think it's also a strong guarantee, also give them more confidence in using those federated learning things than just say, oh, federated learning itself is safe enough, and you just go with a try.
Yeah. Great. We can take this question just here. Yeah.
My question is going to be directed to anybody in an executive leadership position, and it's around governance. That topic came up. So I work in the financial services industry, highly governed all across the board. And some of the big challenges I see come back to ROI, because governance is really not necessarily a profit center. It can definitely hurt your brand if you've left a vulnerability open. But in terms of getting approval, getting your project prioritized around governance, it becomes pretty difficult. It's often not seen as a technical problem by technical leaders. And on top of it, the people building are not incentivized for governance performance. So at the end of the year, when they're being tracked on delivering to production, getting things into a production environment, or the bottom line, an exclusively governance-related project is probably not going to be prioritized or built with that in mind, because that's not how the worker is being incentivized. That's not how the bottom line is being incentivized. So I think for that area, it's very hard to get those things prioritized. And what is your advice to people in this room who have an idea that they want to bring back to help get it prioritized in ways that'll matter to the leaders who select which work gets done?
Yeah, if you're looking to build a standard that spans multiple companies, incredible neutrality is a really important aspect of governance. Because if you want other companies to adopt the standard, you need to be able to prove to the community of the adopters that it's not only going to benefit the company that's building this. And this is the approach that projects like Docker and Kubernetes and others have taken the open source community. And I think it applies to federated learning frameworks as well.
You have something?
I mean, that's something that I personally run into this almost every single day, right? Just similar to the question around product versus technology. And the right way to think about it is, having a good narrative. What I mean by narrative is, if you go to the senior leaders within the firm, is, look, I need to put this governance controls process around it. By the way, this has nothing to do with Federated AI. This is a very common practice, right? You will get roadblocks. But has anyone heard about the Bybit attack? Very few weeks, a couple of months back. And you probably know this very well, right? So the narrative is: would you rather pay penalty for something that regulators will put on you because of a missed payment or missed AML or missed KYC, or would you rather spend the same amount of money to making sure that you don't actually run into this. Because the cost of reputational risk, especially in the regulated financial institutions, is significantly higher than the amount of money that is put in to actually put in that place. I don't think there is a right or wrong or one answer, but as long as you're able to put those narratives with specific examples, and I've seen that happen, by the way, right? Then you have a significantly higher chances of those getting prioritized over everything else.
Great. We'll take the one final question from the lady just in the second row, and that'll be it.
Hi, I'm Laura. Perhaps this is not going to be a popular question, especially to those who work for big name companies, but who owns the data? And are we building the frameworks to actually give the power to the people who are provider of that data, right? I'd like to believe that I own my health data and all of that, right? But that is not necessarily true when there's being decisions made to contribute into these models and to put that data at risk when it's being shared with other organizations. So how do we build responsibly? And are there systems that you know of? Because the codes I've seen today, it was run, and I think, but I don't know if they're using it in that way. Are there systems today that ensure this type of framework and that actually recognize the contribution of the individual?
Yeah, I think fundamentally you own your data. And I think Anna from Vana had a great analogy. If you park your car in a parking lot, the parking lot doesn't own your car. You still own your car. And I think some of that's true with how we lease data to federated models. This is fundamentally a legal question. And again, there's no right answer. It's a question around user consent around the data. But I do think there are technological innovations around privacy preserving data transfer that might be able to create solutions that keep users' data private or self-owned, while also giving the insights of the aggregate data that they're subjecting to the model. And I think that area is very interesting. But fundamentally, we own our data as people. And there are a lot of great standards like the Data Portability Act that let us pull our data from any provider today.
Anyone else? Dead.
I think, unfortunately, when the data goes into the model, right, it's hard to sort of undo it, right? So
There's an unlearning, right?
yes. Well, the unlearning doesn't work right now.
Sure.
Yeah, so I guess you're highlighting that there's technical limits of what can actually be enforced.
That's right. And then also federated learning hasn't really worked as well as centralized training, right? Yeah.
At least historically.
Yeah.
Okay, so any final remarks from anyone about where federated or decentralized might end up in the next 24 months?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity to tap again into this latent compute capacity. There's obviously a huge amount of demand for GPUs. And so we can create the right incentive mechanisms to bring these GPUs into federated networks and leverage their capacity. We'll actually bring the costs, the economic costs of cloud compute down. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the industry and for the world. There's also environmental benefits to this approach as well. So I'm very excited to see what happens in the next 12, 24 months.
Great. Well then, Patrick.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that I've been in the federated learning world for quite a few years now. And I mean, starting from these real world deployments of federated learning for healthcare, I think, and from the news that's coming out of, the Flower AI Summit and what you've heard here today, we're at an inflection point right now. And it's really starting to catch on across companies that have mutual benefit of working together. And my prediction over the next 24 months is that we'll see a lot more of this on a real world scale that's going to really translate to big progress and focus on what federated learning can do for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, I think I would second that. I think these, so if you think about the current, state of the model, they're trying a lot of these data that most of them are public, right? So they've been doing amazing things, but I think the next, or the current, the immediate thing is to solve the sort of like the medical domain, right? So your personal health, right? So I think a lot of these are sort of personalized. There's a necessity that, like you actually can't train on this data, right? You can't collect all these data and train centrally. And people do have shared interest to get it working, right? So essentially, like the only way I can see is viable is through federated learning, right? So like you preserve the privacy, but the model gets the capability so that it can help people's health, for example, right? So all the problem we want the model to solve for us. Yeah.
I think I can add, in my opinion, it's not about the time, like how many, 18, 24, 36 months. In my view, whenever it's more event-based, that when we as community start realizing that privacy is of the models or the data that is used to build is becoming more and more critical at certain point, that's where the Federated AI will start picking up, because now there is a growing concern about the privacy, and hence you actually start using this more decentralized technologies.
Great. I'm actually quite optimistic about this, because that's one thing I'm going to say, that while people say like a federated learning is like doing training on your device, but that's not necessarily true in the sense that, well, your photos doesn't on your device, right? It's on Google, on Apple Cloud. So there actually is a big market for like cloud-based federated learning. Like in the initial thought, well, as a first glance, it sounds a bit crazy because it's already in the cloud. Why not pull them together and train? And it sounds like centralized training. But it's a bit different. I know that AWS is also working on that to enable that. Well, you have database on AWS, and you want to have cross-silo federated learning. And it's true that the data is on the cloud, it's not on your local machine. And it's also true that training happens on the cloud, but it's also a different sort of federated learning, and it's a better guarantee than just pulling all the data in the same cloud server and training it. It's still, in some sense, preserving the privacy of your own cloud, your own cloud drive, etc. So, so what if like Apple decide to go one step forward, trying to adopt federated learning on crazily large Apple Cloud, and so it could be also an opportunity and also a possibility.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. I just wanted to thank you all for joining the panel, and thank you for sharing your views. Thank you.